So if you want something different, reprogram your subconscious.
Hey, it's Walter here, and you're at the Think Profit podcast, where we're going to help you develop a rock-solid trading confidence and avoid the potentially endless cycle of system switching. Right, Hugh?
That's right. We're going to help you develop a wealth mindset, develop a trading strategy that fits your core personality, and help you overcome the obstacles that stop over 90% of traders.
All right, Hugh, sounds good. You ready to go?
Yeah, let's do this.
Hey, Walter, let's talk about imposter syndrome. I know we talked about that a little bit on the last episode, but maybe we can go into that a little bit more in depth. Maybe you could tell us what that is and how that manifests in trading.
Right. So imposter syndrome is when you feel like you're a fraud, basically, right? So we talked a little bit about in the last episode where let's say you're a new trader and you start trading, right? And you have, in your first month, you make 30%. You make a bunch of money. Actually, I know a guy that did this. He went to one of our seminars and he was talking about this. If you feel like you didn't deserve that, if you feel like it wasn't you that did that, right? Then you can easily self-sabotage yourself, right? So you can do something to bring yourself back down to where you believe you should be. And I think this is something that comes along a lot with traders, like the traders we talked about in the last episode, who they could make a lot of money. And then when they hit a certain level, it's like a psychological barrier and then they crumble. Mm-hmm. This is something that, to me, I feel like the root of this is really your core beliefs that you get when you're schooled at university or high school or even primary school. And your home life, the people around you that you trust and admire and ask questions of when you're growing up, you feel like, you're not worthy. Mm-hmm. So you're an imposter. You've lost, you've got something that shouldn't be yours. And in fact, there's a really good interview. I think it's the last interview of the first Market Wizards book. So it's called The Market Wizards by Jack Schwager. And I believe it's the last interview. It's either that one or the New Market Wizards. I believe the New Market Wizards has a different psychologist. I think the first one has a hypnotherapist. And he talks about this guy and how it was kind of an imposter, but he was the other way around. So he had this imposter syndrome where he was a trader, right? Mm-hmm. And he was losing money, and he wouldn't look at his statements or something like that. Like he would get his statements from his broker and he'd throw them away or something. So under hypnotherapy, this all came out, right? It wasn't, the trader had come to the hypnotherapist to try and figure out, how can I improve my trading? But what come out from the hypnotherapy session was that he was basically felt he was a fraud. Mm-hmm. Because he was telling all of his friends he was a trader, but he was actually just losing money hand over fist, Mm-hmm. And so he was talking about what he was doing with his statements and things like that. So the core of this is that you have to change who you are, right? Mm-hmm. So you need to change, and we can change our personality. This is something that people think that, by the time you're 5, your personality is set. That's all BS. We know that from the recent research in psychology that you can change your personality. And you've probably done it. I've done it in my life, where you live in different places with different people and you can kind of reinvent yourself and become a little bit more outgoing, or a little less outgoing, or a little bit more intellectual. You can change it's a progression. Our life is a developmental curve. It's not a straight line. You don't just stay an introvert or an outrovert or extrovert or whatever, you don't stay, simple-minded or whatever. You can improve lots of things. Mm-hmm. So for imposter syndrome, what you can do is change your beliefs about yourself. And that's really, in my estimation, best done with subconscious tools like hypnotherapy, like subliminals. There's a lot of things you can do when you're falling asleep, but ways to seed your subconscious. You can use hypnotherapy. You can use a really good hypnotherapist. NLP is something that people talk about, neuro-linguistic programming, which is kind of on the fringe of psychology. And most psychologists that are academics will frown, but not all of them, but many will. But they frown at ESP research. So, whatever, and there's a lot of good research on that sort of stuff. So I would say if you feel like this is something you're running up against, you would work on yourself, you would work on your core beliefs and change what you think about yourself. Because the way I look at it is your subconscious isn't out to get you. Your subconscious is just your program. So whatever you're programmed to do, look around your life. That's where you're at. Where you're at right now, where you're at today, that is your program. Okay. So if you want something different, reprogram your subconscious, and then you can get different results. The Silva method is another one that people look at. That's another thing you might look into if that makes sense to you. But there are lots of different ways to do it. What are your thoughts on the imposter in trading?
Yeah. So I was just thinking about that, and an interesting reflection of that kind of like, oh, like the younger guy or the newer guy can't be successful is like, I see that in soccer a lot, right? Football.
Yeah.
So like you have these like 16 and 17-year-old kids playing on the senior team, right? With these 30-year-old, 40-year-old guys.
Yeah.
And you don't really see that in any other sport. And, you know, those kids could feel like, oh yeah, I'm an imposter. I don't belong on that senior team. I don't belong with those older guys. But no, these guys are just as good as the rest of them. So I think, you know, that's a good way of looking at things and saying, okay, you know, even if I'm not that experienced in trading, or if I feel like I don't belong here or belong making money or whatever, then you can kind of look at those kids and say, hey, this kid is doing really well at, you know, the highest level of soccer. Why can't I be at that level of soccer also? And I think what you're saying is spot on in that you have to change the way you're programming. And at least from my perspective, there's two ways to do that. One is you can consciously change things. And that's if your programming is more in the conscious mind. But if it's more subconscious, then I believe that you have to get rid of a lot of the traumas that have been programmed into you or have been given to you or whatever, you know, whatever happened. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Like you said, the Silva method, I've seen people get some good results on that. And some of the other stuff I've tried. So yeah, just try a bunch of things and, you know, see how it works.
And it's important to remember that it's kind of normal, you know, for people to you know, to feel like no matter what they've done, no matter what they've accomplished, that it was, you know, that they're a fraud or that they're incompetent. I mean, that's kind of normal to feel that way, because there's always going to be someone who's better than you, right? Like that's just the case. Like when the models go to the runway, there's always going to be a model that's more attractive than they are. When the bodybuilders go to the bodybuilding contest or whatever, there's always going to be a bigger, you know, more defined, stronger dude or whatever, you know what I mean? Or whatever. Like, and the same in trading. Like if you hang out with traders and you're starting to click and you're starting to make money, there's always going to be a trader who's trading bigger accounts or more, or making higher percentage or whatever. And traders can be kind of jerks that way. You know, you see a lot of like talks, traders give talks and they talk about how great they are and stuff like that. And it's, you know, it's funny. Like, I don't know. I just find it interesting. Like, how a lot of times traders will use their past to justify, you know, maybe they feel imposter syndrome, you know what I mean? Like maybe that's what's going on. Like they feel like, you know, I worked at, you know, Bank of America and I was trading these huge amounts and I made this amount of money for my bank, you know, and now he no longer works at Bank of America. He's no longer trading that huge amount, right? He's no longer doing that, but he still wants to feel important. So he'll tell those stories about what he used to do, and you know what I mean? And feel like, oh, I called the top on the pound and blah, 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 you know, things like that. Like, it's just, to me, it's just screams imposter syndrome, you know, that's what they're, and there's a lot of that in trading. Even you know, it's funny, they say, actually, this is a really good thing. I know I've talked about in the past, but it might be important for people who haven't heard this before. They say that one of the things I learned from one of my first psychologist professors was that you can get free therapy by going to a park bench, sitting on the park bench and watching people walk by, and listen to yourself, listen to what you say about the people that walk by, because that's the stuff that you're projecting out there. Do you know what I mean? So you see that guy and you go, oh, he thinks he's so smart and blah, blah, blah. Well, that's basically, you know, it's a reflection of what you're saying, what you think inside about yourself. So yeah. So that's another thing you can do too, is catch that. Because if you don't know why it's happening, it's hard, right? Maybe you go see a hypnotherapist, maybe Silva method, maybe, you know, park bench method, whatever. But there are a lot of ways to kind of get at that. Yeah.
All right, cool. Thanks, Walter.
Thank you.
All information in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not trading or investment advice.